In this short video, I'll talk about the measure that's known as the outlay equivalence measure. Refer to it as Angus Deaton's measure, though it's earlier than him. It's due to uh, efforts in the 1940s to construct measures of poverty, based on consumption measures. And the problem that was run into then was that different families had different numbers of children, and so the same two households with the same incomes, if one had more children than the other, then presumptively the household with more children should be considered to be poorer, in the sense that there was less income available for consumption for the adults in the household. The question was, how much poorer should they be considered? Just a little bit poorer or a lot poorer if they had children? And in order to understand that, economists needed to understand, well, how much does having a child affect consumption for adults? And so, beginning in the 1940s and after, economists started running regressions of how much expenditure on categories of goods and services that were primarily oriented towards adults, adult clothing, cigarettes, alcohol, other kinds of expenditure categories that were for adults, how much they were affected by the number of children in the family. And our interest, of course, is whether boy children will affect those expenditures differently from girl children. And of course, we have to control for the level of income when we're thinking about how much a boy child or a girl child affects expenditure on adult goods. Given these regressions, we can then calculate what's commonly called an outlay equivalent, which is the expression that we have here on the right. On the numerator, we have the partial derivative, so that's this partial sign, the partial derivative of expenditure on the adult good category, so it's the price times the quantity, so that's this expenditure on the adult good. How that changes when there's a boy, divided by how expenditures, so again we have expenditures on the adult good category, how that changes when there's a change in income. So it's the ratio of how expenditures change when there's a boy to how expenditures change when income changes. And we normalize that by basically per capita income, y over n, what the average per capita income is in these households that are our sample. So we can think of this outlay equivalent then as the change in expenditure when we have a child divided by the change in expenditure when we have a change of income, and the whole thing normalized by per capita income. So we might imagine some numbers. So we suppose that when we have a child, expenditure on this adult good category, maybe it's adult clothing, maybe it's adult foods, so an extra child means that expenditure goes down by 10, so expenditure decreases by $10. We can also estimate from our regression how much expenditure changes when income changes. So we have the change in expenditure when income changes. So we imagine that an extra dollar of income generates 5 more cents of expenditures on this adult good category. So that's the 0.05. Every extra dollar in income, $0.05, that is 5 cents, are spent on this adult category. And then we take that ratio and we normalize it by per capita income. So we get this minus 10 over 0.05. It gives us negative 200, and 2,000 over 4 gives us 500. So the ratio then is negative 0.40. How do we interpret this 0.40? Well, we can interpret it as if per capita income declines by 40%, spending goes down by the same amount as one extra child. Remember that per capita income is $500, so 40% of $500 is $200. So if our income declined by $200 and every dollar decline in income we spend 5 cents less, that means that a $200 decline would lead to a $10 decline in spending. which is the same as the amount that spending declines when we have a child. So that's the meaning of the outlay equivalent. How much spending goes down, how much income would have to go down by, what percentage income would have to go down by, per capita income would have to go down by, in order to generate the same reduction in spending on adult goods as if we had an extra child. Our interest, of course, is going to be comparing the outlay equivalent measure for girls versus boys. Is it the case that when we have an extra girl in the family, our spending on adult goods goes down by more or by less? And presumptively, discrimination, or that is favoring sons, means that when we have a son, our expenditures on adult goods goes down by even more, because we're spending more on the son than we are on the daughter. So when we have a son, we would expect that the outlay equivalent would be greater than when we have a daughter. That is, spending on adult goods would go down by more when we have a son than when we have a daughter. That would be, in some sense, presumptive evidence of son preference. Of course, it could be that we perceive the needs of boys as different from girls, so it's not like we're discriminating against them. We perceive the families and the society that we're analyzing and the economy that we're analyzing perceive the needs to be different. So there's a lot more to examining gender discrimination than just looking at outlay equivalents. But outlay equivalents are certainly consistent with gender discrimination.